let me just say, God said that we must be born again, right? So we are born of the flesh from the mother. And when you're born of the mother, you're dying. You're not living. You are dying. You're in darkness and don't know it. And so God said that we must be born again of the Spirit, which is of Him, which is coming back to the Father. And when you are born again of the Spirit, you start to live. You're not dying, you are living. You're walking by the light. He's guiding you. He is with you. He loves you. He allows you to see. And so the fact that you've been born again of the Spirit of God, then you are God's son or God's daughter. You are His son or daughter because God only allows those who have returned to Him to see. Otherwise, if you have not been born again of Him in the Spirit, then you live in darkness and Satan is your daddy. You are a son or a daughter of Satan. But when you're born again of God, you are His son. You are His daughter. But what I realized from all this is that people have been so brainwashed about God and who He is and your relationship with Him, you're afraid to say it. A whole lot of folks are afraid to say, yes, I am a son or a daughter of God. Why would you be afraid or embarrassed or whatever to say, God is my Father? Even in the Lord's Prayer, our Father, which art in heaven, right? So if you've been born of Him, He is your Father. Otherwise, you can't be born of Him. How are you going to be born of Him and yet separated from Him? And and this whole thing about being Christlike and all that, that's just stuff Christians made up. Christians got a lot of sayings that sound Christian-y, that sound godly, and from those sayings, people think they've been born of God. And if you notice, those who try to be Christ-like, they're not going to say they are sons or daughters of God. We are sons and daughters of God if you've been born again of Him. That's why He said, you must be born again. Come back to the Father and be of Him, and He will guide your every way. His ways are easy. His burdens are light because you are His son or daughter. Don't be afraid to say it because if you deny Him, He's going to deny you. How you think that He's going to, when you die, and hopefully you go to heaven, and there you are ringing the white bell, the white gate bell, right? And Jesus, God like, go down there and answer that door, Jesus. And then Jesus go and answer the door, and Jesus like, who is it? My name is Tom, Uncle Tom. And then, are you a son or daughter of God? I don't know. He ain't gonna let you in. All right? You are, don't be afraid. If you've been born again of God, you can now see. I once was blind, but now I see. You were blind because you were in the fallen state. Satan was your daddy. Now that you can see, you have taken on the mind of your Father. You've taken on the ways of your Father. You have love. You operate from perfect love. I can tell you I have no anger because He took it away and replaced it with love. He is love. That's why you hear a lot of the guys and gals, the ladies and the men saying that I don't hate anymore. That means that you are a daughter of God because there's no love in Satan. And when you're in that fallen state, you do have hate. And so don't be afraid. Don't feel guilty. Don't feel unworthy. Unworthy means that you see that it's His love and you can't puff yourself up thinking that it's of you. You know it's from Him, right? So that, because that ego is dying. But it's okay to say God is your Father if you're born again of Him, all right? Because you're born back into His nature. Why wouldn't He be your Father? Don't be afraid to say that. But the Christians have been so dumbed down and brainwashed, they're afraid to say it. They feel unworthy. They feel this. That Satan got you feeling unworthy from all the intellectual knowledge that you have learned. I can actually tell you, I realized a while back that God was my Father. And I'm like, wow, that's something else, that God is my Father, and I know it, and I can say it. It's like seeing your earthly father for the first time. And you look at him and be like, wow, that's my father. I look just like him. I walk like him. I'm just like him. With kids especially, there's like a sense of happiness, of pride to know you're just like your father. I remember when my son lived with me for about a couple of years. He was like 3 years old or so. And when people would tell him, at that time we took the bus sometimes, and they would say, oh, that little boy looks just like you. You look just like your daddy. And he would just puff up with joy that he looked like me. I felt that way about my earthly father. So you better be happy, be grateful that God is your father. Don't be afraid to say God is your father. Worry about what someone else is going to think, or Satan telling you, oh, that's not humble. That's not that. And Christ said, he is not him, but is his Father in him. He spoke about his Father. I need to know my Father's will. God is my Father. I am a son of God. They got mad at him for saying it. Oh, who are you? I think the Jews did, right? The Jews got mad at Christ for saying, I am a son of God. What the? And they were mad because they didn't recognize the Son. They didn't know God, so they didn't recognize the Son. They read about God, but they didn't know him. And so they didn't like it when Jesus said he's the Son. Likewise, the fallen people are not going to like it when you say you're the son or daughter of God. They're like, what are you saying? Blaspheme. That's because they don't know him. And when you just read about God, you just know about him. But when you're born of his Spirit, you become his child. Christ become your brother. That's why Christ said, whatever he owns, you own it too. We're an inheritance of God. Whatever he owns, we own it too. All right? He's not going to give that to the fake children. He's only going to give it to your children. I mean, his children. Just as you would with your blood children. Right? So it was so interesting to see the people who were saying they weren't sure, and I don't know, I'm Christ-like. And the people there who were saying that they were Christ-like, they couldn't even explain that. Because Christ's personality is love, because that's what his Father is. And he came so that that light of the Father can shine through the Son, that we may see. And that's what's happening with you when you wake up. Your Father, light is shining through you. That way those who are lost can find their way. And you can see your way. All right? It's okay to be a son. That's why he said you must be born again of God. Overcome mama, which is of Satan, that spirit in her. It's not that person, but the spirit made home in her. Return to the Father. If you notice, the mothers turn you away from your fathers. Well, God wants you to come back to him and become his son or daughter. And to answer our friend Maria's question, if you're a child of God, that means you're a daughter of God if you're a lady. If you're a child of God and you're a male, you're a son of God. You're God's daughter or son. It means the same thing as far as I can tell. Doesn't it, James?
Yeah.
As far as I can tell. And so all you Christ-like people, you don't know what you're talking about. That's why you have to quote the Bible to see what it says. But I don't know if those words are in the Bible, be Christ-like. The Christians made that up because they were blind. And so they read you the scriptures and they talk about what Christ did. And they tell you, be Christ-like. But if you're not born again, you can't even do what he did. He said, greater works than you do. And not because of you, but because of the Father. All right? So I am a son of God. And I'm blessed to be a son of God. I'm humbled by it. That's what you heard me say that. It is amazing to be a Christian because you operate in his nature now. But I really, really, really appreciate the feedback on that. I did not expect that. But then as it was happening, I was reminded how people are afraid to admit that there's sons and daughters of God. We are sons and daughters of God if we've been born again of him. If you've not been born again of him, then Satan your daddy, whether you admit it or not. All right? That's why you hear some of the callers today saying that their lives are a little easier. They can see the right way to go. They are overcoming that fallen state. That's because they're sons and daughters of God. He cleaned up all that mess because it's spiritual. What do you think about that, James? That makes sense a little bit?
Yeah.
No?
Well, but then how do you know that you've been born again?
Because and the reason you know you've been born again of God, you can now see. You see it by the light of God, by the love of God. He lives in you. He is love. He and love is there. And the light shines. And those who have been born of him can see. That's how you know you're a son of God or a daughter. And you have peace. And always, just for those, and then I got in. Those that don't have, when you are born again, you got to know that you're now overcoming the imagination, the thoughts and things like that. So as a little child growing into an adult, son or daughter of God, you're going to believe some of those thoughts sometimes. And Satan's going to tell you, you're not born again. Don't believe it. Don't believe anything he has to say about anything. He want to make you doubt yourself. And a caller mentioned once you're born again, you can't be unborn. You cannot be unborn. You can't go into mama's womb. I know a lot of you like to go back into mama's womb, but you can't do it. Likewise, once you're born again of God, you cannot be unborn. All right? So you will know because you will be able to see. You will be able to see. And so when you fall into those thoughts, you're going to see that you fall into a thought. And even though you're feeling weird, you know you're in a thought, and you'll be able to eventually come out of it. And then as you grow, you just come out of it right away because you know the difference between the darkness and the light. Amazing. Will you say that, Doug? That makes sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can see. I once was blind, but now I see. And you have love for even your enemy. And your enemies come in all different sizes and colors. Even the Christians and the so-called friends who pretend to be your friend can be your enemy. Really. But you'll see all that. And it won't bother you. You'll wish them well because your Father is guiding you. He is your Father. It's okay for him to be your Father. All right. So I really, really appreciate it.